We are back.
What's up, guys?
So today we have a good one for brand and ad agencies. If you want to have higher impact for your campaigns, ultimately you need happier content creators.
Yeah, we've been talking about this more, how it's important for, especially if brands and agencies want to have more successful campaigns. In our opinion, you need to be working with higher quality creators and happier creators, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're working with happy creators, they're going to want to work with you again. And we feel like it's easier to retain and work with good, high quality creators
Yes.
than trying to find new creators each time you have a campaign.
Exactly, because you know that they're reliable, you know they'll over deliver, or their team will support the process and streamline things for you. So ultimately, your life will be easier, the campaign will be more successful, and everyone wins. So we are going to dive right in to the first one on our little list here, which is all about responsiveness. And that also in our previous episode, talking about how content creators can attract better brands, repeat brand partners, and agency partners. Some of this has some overlap with it, but responsiveness is at its core. And we understand as a talent agency that our inboxes and our day-to-day communication is wild and it's busy. And we understand on the ad agency or brand side, like your day is just as busy, but it's really important to keep your creators and your talent management teams in the loop on what's going on. Because otherwise I'm like, is that person still at this company or at this agency?
Yeah. I mean, it's like the same thing. If you're transparent and open about what's going on, it just makes it a little bit more of a smoother process.
Yeah.
Planning for both sides, and creators really love that, especially, and even talent management agencies love when there's this kind of good communication happening. Otherwise, it's like you said, sometimes we're sort of waiting, we're not sure what's happening, or we're following up, and then we won't hear from them, even though we get it on their end. Brand agencies, you guys are planning. They might not have an answer right away, but
no answer, no update yet is always totally fine. I think that's the biggest thing is sometimes we've seen this more even in the past year, I would say, is when there is no update, it's just there is no response until there is an update. But I think it's completely fine and also super helpful what we hear from our creators and other creators that we talk to in the industry. Just any sort of response is helpful because it also means that you value the creator's time and you also value the talent management team's time, just as we are trying to continually, or the creator should be keeping you in the loop of what's going on their end, of delays that may be happening on their end. That's kind of, it's the two-way street of then forming that deeper relationship and that respect between each other and respecting each other's time and just continuing to keep each other keeping it transparent to keep each other in the loop of what's going on. So very important in step one. Also, if a creator has worked with a brand 3, 6, 9, 12, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, I think stressing less about that is really important. Also, so it's not a turnoff to a creator who's like, well, but I do share a mix of those brands. And if anything, it should show that brand or that ad agency, I'm a great fit. And even sharing organically or having done a paid partnership with someone 6 months or 12 months ago, it's okay. I mean, that's what creators are here for.
I mean, we've seen this before where agencies, brands, they want to work with a creator that hasn't worked in that category or with any other competitor brand at all, usually in the last 6 months, 12 months. But I mean, in our opinion, it would make sense to work with creators who have worked with other brands in that category or share it organically, only because then you know that their audience and their community is sort of primed to, they obviously like that style of content or those products or that kind of brand. So I get it. Get it. In some ways, yes, special circumstances, we understand why
there are nuances,
but I think in general, I think it's okay if brands and agencies are not kind of dissuaded and restricted by working with creators who have worked with a competitor brand in the past.
Yeah. And again, it's industry specific too. And it's also specific to if you did work with someone, for example, if a creator worked with an activewear brand on a 12-month partnership and then a different activewear brand came in 3 or 6 months later, I get how that can be sensitive to like the new brand or even the past brand.
Yeah.
So there are for sure nuances to this. We're not saying this is a sweeping statement, but have some flexibility and kind of think holistically around what you're asking for from even that individual creator. Are they someone who does show a ton of activewear? So it's okay. It kind of fits with their brand.
Right.
Or is it someone who has been extremely brand loyal?
Yes.
So it's hard to break away from that.
Yeah. And that's what I think we totally get it. It makes sense where if they've been promoting or sharing organically or working with a brand, a competitor brand, like a major competitor brand to you in the past or even the recent past.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense where it's like, okay.
In a big way.
Yeah. And I think it's fine to check with them. Like, are you going to continue working with them? Do you have anything planned for them in the future? Otherwise, we would love to be sort of your main brand that you're promoting in this category moving forward. And I think that's completely fine too.
I agree. And I think that's where that open dialogue comes in and just being communicative, responsive, and just, I think, thinking of things more holistically in that way, which then leads us into the next one of not treating a creator as a transaction, boxing them into everyone's the same CPM. That's what we're looking for. We're just churning through and moving on. We're lucky enough to work with majority of teams that really operate totally differently than that. That's why we genuinely believe we have the best ad agency and brand partnerships out there in the space. And it's just because of how they treat our creators, they treat us, and vice versa. But for teams who are very stuck on a metric and they don't view the entire creator as a person and also as someone who has a unique voice, who has a unique impact, it can be very limiting and it can be very unexciting to the creator, even if they have this killer CPM or this killer conversion rate. At the end of the day, that says to us and to the creator, it says, I just am here to churn through the audience and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
That's how it feels.
Yeah. And I think that's part of also brands and agencies when they're planning campaigns, I think if you're trying to recruit and cast a lot of creators, then you're sort of trying to find a more efficient way to price them, budget for them, collect rates from them. And then you're kind of using like a standard thing, like a certain metric or engagement rate or something like that to just kind of apply quickly and easily.
Yeah.
Totally get that. But that's where we say, if you can think about, can you pare it down? Can you pare the number of creators that you're working with and kind of hone in on why each of them is unique in that way? And even pointing that out when you reach out to them, which we see that. And I think creators love that when you, and obviously it can be hard if you're reaching out to a lot of creators, but that's where, again, if you can focus in maybe on a smaller, higher quality group of creators on what makes them unique, mention it in their email or the DM when you reach out. And it just makes them feel more excited and just really more interested in working with brands longer term than just feeling like, okay, this is probably just going to be like a one-off transaction. Who knows if they're going to reach out to me again in the future.
Right. Well, and on that note, I think that is where it's super important to get to know the creators that you are reaching out to some extent, or if you are at the point of hopping on a kickoff call, you've never gotten to work with that creator before, make sure that you've at least taken a quick look at their feed to know who you're talking to, because we had a case recently where we got on a call and the team didn't know that one of our creators was fairly pregnant at this point. And they were talking about how much they loved them. And I'm like, even the creator was like, wait, did they know?
Yeah.
And
do they even know?
Do they even know me?
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's important to take time to really, again, if you want happier creators who are really going to go above and beyond, they are people at the end of the day, and they pick up on those things that are, okay, this is just a transaction, or this is someone who at this agency or this brand genuinely cares about my voice, and therefore I have even more at stake to do a better job for them as people as well. So that's it's just something to keep in mind. Being mindful of timelines. So we get it. Things move fast in this space. We can move fast. Our creators can move fast. But I think there's a difference between moving quickly and just kind of barking orders at like, hey, concept is approved. I want content tomorrow, or I want content 2 days from now. I'm like, I get that that is the case. We understand that, but the approach is everything.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I think sometimes brands and agencies, they're kind of only thinking about their campaign or their brand that they're working with,
which we understand.
And but you have to also keep in mind that creators, especially good high quality creators, they usually have other partnerships in the works or happening while you're reaching out. Like they have things going on right now, so it's kind of like they have to start thinking about, okay, when am I going to be creating content? When can I post this content? Where we do see situations where I think brands and agencies, we get that they have certain specific dates that they want in the future for them to post.
Yeah.
But I think keeping in mind that there needs to be a little bit of flexibility, we're probably going to have to move some things around to make that work in some cases.
Yeah. And again, it's the approach.
Yes.
It's, can we rush this? Does the creator have time to get this done by Monday, by Tuesday, and 2 days from now? Whatever the case is, it's more of a open dialogue again of the way it's approached and the question, the way that you're asking if that can be done versus like this has to be done by X date. Again, we get it. Like ideally this can be done by Tuesday, and if the creator has time to shift some things around, which we will do everything in our power to try to do that for our long-term partners and our favorite brands and agencies that we work with. But I do think that it's important to think about the approach, because what is the term? You attract more bees with honey than.
I don't think I've heard that one before.
Oh, well, there you go.
That's a new one.
That's called attracting.
If you guys have any other good ones
honey.
like that, let us know. No, I mean, I think obviously, scheduling is a big factor in planning campaigns with good creators. And I think just being open, transparent about what you're planning. I think if you have very specific dates that a post needs to go live, mentioning that in the very beginning, like this is a no-go if you can't post on this.
I agree. And I also think then having a process on the brand or ad agency's end to ensure that if we're hitting the concept deadlines and things like that, that it's not taking, an extremely long amount of time that eats into the creator's ability to then create the content. So, I mean, that is the reality, that if you're going to take 2 weeks to review a concept, but then the creator only gets 2 days to create the content, that's not balanced. And I think this whole video and podcast today is about balance and about that win-win, because again, when we say all of this, it's said with love, because we love our brand agency partners and we get the stress that comes with the role and with campaigns. But again, it all comes with balance, and creating happier partners creates stronger campaigns.
And we know that it's not perfect every time. Like each campaign is case by case basis. So yes, we totally get they're never going to be the same for each campaign and creator that you work with.
Okay, so the brief.
The brief.
The brief is an important one.
Creative briefs.
Honestly, most briefs can be really pared down. And the reason that we say that is because creators are reviewing quite a few briefs usually. And they're also not just focused on their paid content. They're also focused on their organic content. They're focused on other projects that they have going on. So the faster that you can get to the point of the brief and get the key messaging, get the most important parts of the campaign across is always our recommendation, because we have seen it many times where there's an extremely lengthy brief, up to like 60 plus pages in some cases, where there was something on page 38 that a creator accidentally missed.
Those aren't as common, but
they're not. But I'm just saying,
as an example.
An example.
I mean, we do see pretty long briefs.
Yeah, and they can really be pared down. And I understand. I think even ad agencies briefing a brand is different than briefing a content creator. So it's almost like you could have your own brief with the brand, but then have a pared down brief, knowing the style of workflow that a content creator has versus more of a on the brand side. So again, having the quick hitting key messaging, most important parts of the campaign first. For example, if you have a unique brand name, have that up front. Have a little voice clip or a YouTube.
How to pronounce it.
Yeah, on how to pronounce that. And that way you can avoid what are the key things that you see asking for reshoots or edits around, and use that to make sure that those are in the first couple of pages, and then all of your do's and do nots obviously on your pages at the end. But I do think that a brief can really be pared down.
Yeah, and we love creative briefs.
I love a creative brief.
It's super helpful for creators, talent agencies.
And I also think that the reason that we're also saying this too is because sometimes creators can get so caught up in the brief itself, especially the lengthier ones, that then they don't feel that they have creative freedom, when that can be like totally not the intent of the creative brief. It usually is not the intent of the creative brief. Okay, moving right along to the FTC guidelines.
This is a fun category.
Is it?
Yeah. No, this is not going to be a lengthy FTC course.
No.
But
we could actually do
it just comes down to understanding just the high level basic FTC requirements for and disclosures for social media content.
Yes.
And this comes across where I think makes sense. The FTC, there aren't 100% clear guidelines either. It's not, sometimes it is
we
gray.
really appreciate that.
But they do have some basic guidelines that they're saying, hey, as long as you do this, like, you're going to be covered.
Or this other thing is a nice to have, but it's not a necessary thing.
Or like a variation, you could do it this way instead.
Yes. And again, we're not going to sit here and talk through FTC guidelines, but I do think from our perspective, we are a team that's going to make sure that even if the brand or agency has not even included some things that need to be in there for FTC guidelines, per FTC guidelines, we will make sure that it's added, because we want to protect our creators, ourselves, and our brand partners ultimately. But we are not sitting here ever pushing back because we just don't want to comply with FTC. I think that's the biggest misconception by some teams, that think a team or creator is just trying to hide things. And yeah, those are the creators that you don't want to work with over and over again.
They are out there. I mean, you see it every day. There are a lot of creators who
will try to hide it.
Clearly not even disclosing anything, or they try to hide it.
And it's not cool. That's not how we roll.
A good talent agency shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly.
And a good creator should also not be doing that.
Yeah. So ultimately, it's just more so when we're bringing things up, we're flagging things to the teams. Like what we try to do is inform what we're seeing on our side, the guidelines that we're keeping up with, and making sure ultimately that it's not so overdone and it's slapped onto everything in every place that it doesn't need to be, so that the audience wants to engage with it and doesn't just like keep scrolling because it was overdone. So ultimately, just being smart and educating yourself and keeping up with the latest FTC guidelines so that you can make sure that you're not asking the creator to overdo it, and that you're also providing the best experience for the end user in the campaign. Okay, contracts. So obviously in our world and the teams that we work with, all of our fave ad agencies and brand partners have no issue with this. I will say that first. But there are teams out there that either sneak some things into the contract, either knowingly or unknowingly sneak them in. So I think it's really important as the ad agency or brand to, when you're sending a contract off to the creator, especially if they're not with a talent management team, please, for their sake, and also keeping a happy creator who wants to come back and also over deliver, like, make sure that that contract is fair and what you agreed to in the first place. That's number one. Again, that is not our concern with our partners, but that has happened to creators out there. Not in our group, but just make the contract fair. The other big factor that we've seen in some agency agreements that we don't work with often, but then we will edit, is the right to not pay a creator if they haven't received an invoice within a certain period of time. Now, we are on our invoicing game, but there are plenty of creators out there, or some talent management teams who are not, or it's just human error. They accidentally don't send an invoice. But basically it's how it's worded in the agreement is there is no recourse that a creator has where we understand where this is coming from, because oftentimes teams have been burned by getting an invoice 9 months, 12 months later plus.
So if there is a human error or whatever happens with that situation where the campaign gets extended and something happens that they end up not sending it within that certain amount of time, it doesn't feel like you're trying to avoid even paying them.
Yeah. And I think that's the bigger thing that says to us and to the creator. And that's where they get a little turned off from kind of the jump of why is this in here? And for us, we're like, we understand why it's in there, but at the same time, there could be language that's added in there to make it feel more reasonable.
Well, we've even seen cases where we have sent invoices to the main contact for the campaign at an agency or a brand, and then it turns out 60 days later, if it's net 60 days, they're supposed to pay in 60 days. We're following up. Hey, we haven't received payment yet. Next thing we know, we're getting a bounce back that that person's no longer at the company anymore. So those are the situations like we're trying to avoid, and why we bring this up. And it just shows like a mutually beneficial way to agree on a payment term.
Yeah. And it just doesn't feel like the brand or agency is just not trying to pay. And it kind of goes back to one last thing I was going to say on that is, just as you want a creator to stay on their timelines and be as tight and close to those as possible, they also want to get paid as tight and close as possible. And I think it goes then back to the kind of beginning of this whole podcast of communicate. So if something has changed, your accounts payable system has changed, like you mentioned, or something has changed on your end that will cause a delay in payments, just flag it rather than the creator then trying to feel like they have to follow up and all of that. So I think ultimately the biggest thing is keeping clear lines of communication and ensuring that the creator feels that the brand and agency is trying to actually pay them. So, one last thing on that note is paying invoices on time or as close to on time as possible. And again, like I just said, communicating if there are delays, but a creator is counting on you as the brand or agency, then delivering on your side. And the biggest thing on your side is that payment piece. So keeping in touch with the creator on any sort of possible delays. If it's net 30, net 60, net 90, it doesn't have to be paid at the 60 or 90 day mark. It can be paid anytime within that mark. So at the point that we're at, 30, 60, 90, we do expect it to be paid on time, especially if it's over a net 30 time frame. I do think that's where it's even more like the stakes are now higher for a creator to then get paid on time.
Well, and they're planning on that income
exactly.
coming in, or even if they're working with a talent management agency, there are a lot of other people behind that payment happening. And I think a lot of people are planning around that. Creators, their income is variable each month anyway. So the more that their good partners can stay on top of paying them on time, then it's more likely that they're going to want to work with them in the future.
They're going to be far happier, I can say that, than those who are feeling like that's not a priority. Ultimately, it's just be a good brand partner, agency partner, and the biggest thing is the payment piece is very important. Okay, last but certainly not least is thinking long-term in terms of the creators that you're working with and the talent management teams that you really enjoy working with. So think long-term. Even if you're hiring a creator on for a one-off, one-time post, we really advise to still treat them as if they are a longer term partner. Again, that goes back to the style in which you communicate, the openness to hearing their ideas out, and wanting to form a relationship versus treating them like a transaction, because ultimately you do want them sharing about your brand or the brand if you're an ad agency more than just their sponsored post. And so that's where fostering that rapport and that back and forth and that supportive relationship will in turn increase their level of excitement for the brand and also feel like the brand or agency genuinely cares about them as a person. And at the end of the day, they're people They want relationships in this industry. The good ones do. We do. And we really value that and want to go above and beyond for those partners. So I think long-term is key.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we view every partnership is we view things long-term and building that relationship.
Yes.
And I think also creators feel when it doesn't feel like a long-term thing. You can kind of feel when a brand or agency is not viewing it as that. And we understand that campaign or that brand you might not be planning campaigns for them again until next year. We totally understand that, but just viewing them as like a partner that you would work with across other clients that you work with as well is something that goes a long way with creators and even us as a talent management agency. And we can kind of feel that. And I think creators get really excited when the same partners come back again and again and again and want to work with them because they just feel like that there is that relationship. Those are the ones that we really try to push for more often.
Yep.
And then it makes creators happier.
Well, and then that's where there's more flexibility in rates, and there's more flexibility in terms of over delivery and things like that. So I think that's where that outlook and that mindset and that approach, it's all in that making it a win-win all the time is really where you're going to find the most success in each campaign, whether you're an ad agency or you're a brand, and thinking long-term. So with that,
we about wrapped up?
We're about wrapped up today. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to let us know. Shoot us a DM over at IKONICFOX and let us know if there's anything you want to hear coming up. And we will see you in the next one.
See you guys.